So we're going to start. Hello everyone, and thank you for coming, and thanks to the people online for joining us. My name is Jessica Cauchard. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in human-computer interaction at Stanford University. And this panel is called Out of the Ordinary Jobs After a CS Degree. And when we were asked with Anke to organize panels for here, we're like, okay, what's really interesting to women? You know, what panel do we want to do? And we were thinking, one thing about women is like, we're not that many. So this is a chart of like how many women, so you have the number on the right and the person on the left, how many women do computer science, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate. And if you look in doctorates, the numbers didn't change much, but if we look at masters and bachelors, the numbers really increased. But then if you look at the percentages on the left, they did not. So yeah, we're more women doing computer science, but there's just more people doing computer science. And actually, not really much more women. But then what happens? If we look at like science, engineering, and technology, women quit. Like a lot of women just end up leaving the industry. And so it's about 50-50, but you know, it's pretty bad. And if we look at the private workforce, it's really bad. So women just abandon their training, or they stay, but then they do something else, either in the same industry or a different industry. And one of the main reasons women do that is because they go to work sometimes as a software engineer, or they go to a small company or a medium company. They don't feel very welcome, or they don't like the attitude, they don't like the environment, and they feel like, what else can I do? If I go to another company, it's probably going to be similar. And it's really hard to just think, okay, what can I do that's really going to inspire me, use my training, what is different in what I can do? And the idea is like, can we run a panel today that's going to inspire you? So if you start a job and you don't love it, what else can you do? You know, are there different things you can do? Can we look at startups? Can we think about ideas? Can we think about industry? Can we think about academia? What else? And that's pretty much what we wanted to do today. So we have three amazing people, and I'm really excited about our panelists because they come from a range of very different backgrounds, and I think they will help you just give you ideas and answer your questions. So each of them is going to talk for a few minutes, and then we'll just let you ask questions. And if you don't have any questions to ask, I've got a few to get you started, but really do ask questions. You know, even if you feel it's a bit outside the scope, or you're really not sure what you want to do next, or you want to do something different, please ask, because I think they can really help you. So we're going to start with Anke. Can you hear us? So you can also follow us on Twitter if you want, and you can ask your questions on Twitter, and we'll answer them too.
So hi, my name is Anke Brock. I'm a research scientist at Inria in Bordeaux in France. So I'm now working in academia, but I've also worked in industry beforehand, so I can talk a bit about both experiences. So this is where I've lived in my life. So my journey starts to the right, actually here in Stuttgart in Germany, where I first did an engineering diploma. And after finishing the diploma, I was already wondering if I wanted to do a PhD thesis, or actually I already knew I wanted to do a PhD thesis, but I didn't have enough courage to do so. So I got offered a few jobs in industry that sounded really nice, so I went to industry. I went to the north of Germany, to a small town called Hildesheim, close to Hanover, where I worked for 5 years as an engineer at Bosch. And in the beginning, I really liked my job because it was really close to research, but I noticed while I was working there, it became more and more of a development job, that I was unhappy with what I was doing, and that I really wanted to do this PhD I had been thinking about for a few years. And so I decided to change, and I went back to university. I moved to France, to the south of France, to Toulouse. I first did a master in human-computer interaction, and then I did a PhD, also in human-computer interaction, and a postdoc. And then last October, I got hired at Inria in Bordeaux, which is also in the south of France. So I really shortly want to talk about what my research interests are. So all the way in industry and in academia, I've been working around geographic information. So when I worked at Bosch, I was working on navigation systems and driver assistance systems. then in my PhD, I worked on interactive maps for blind people. So how can you turn geographic information, how can you make it accessible to people who can't see? And then now I'm working on interacting with maps, but not for blind people, for everyone. And we're looking at how you can do this for museums to make it fun to interact with maps, and also at smart city projects. So I'm here also to represent Inria, who is a sponsor of the conference. So I have to shortly explain how research works in France. So in France you have jobs at the university, assistant professor and professor jobs, but you also have research institutes where people are hired to do research. So you can teach if you want, but you're not obliged to teach. And I got a position as a research scientist like this. So Inria, there's some figures about Inria. So you can see that it's a few thousand people working in France. There's 8 centers in different cities in France, but there's also international collaborations. For instance, there's a collaboration with the Silicon Valley universities. There's a center in Chile also. What is interesting is that Inria is focusing only on computer science and related disciplines. So mathematics, bioinformatics, human-computer interaction, cognitive science. And it covers all the disciplines that are included in this area. So if you want to find more information on Inria, you can also have a look at the website. And so later, if you have questions, I can answer questions about academia, but also about my experience in industry if you want. And I think Monika is next.
Hi, my name is Monika, and I work on the text-to-speech team at Google London. I'm a technical program manager there. So my journey to Google, I first moved to the UK many years ago to study at Edinburgh University. I did a master's degree in speech and language processing. And right after that, I moved to Cambridge to work in a small startup. It was very tiny at that point. I was an engineer at Phonetic Arts. We were working on speech synthesis for the computer game industry. It was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. Frequently, I was the only girl on the team. Then we hired some more engineers. And after 3 years, we were acquired by Google, and we moved to London. I've now been at Google for 5 years. My first project there, I was leading languages development for speech synthesis. That took me about 3 years, 4 years. And just recently, I started doing research into speech synthesis perception by blind users. This is what I'm doing now, working on accessibility at Google. So what is text-to-speech? What do we do? Generally, it's a very fascinating interdisciplinary field. We come from various backgrounds, not just computer science. Most of us are electrical engineers, there's mathematicians, linguists. And it's a very fascinating discipline when a lot of expertise from varying fields comes together to create something really cool. We provide all the speech output for Google products. So if you're familiar with Google Now or Translate or Maps, the speech output that you can hear there is what our team works on. And it's a great opportunity to work on something where it really makes huge impact. And everything you do every day at work has impact on millions of users. I'm going to be here at the conference for the rest of the day. So feel free to approach me, ask questions. You can also send me an email. I'll be happy to reply if you're interested about anything connected to careers at Google or what we do in London. Thanks so much. And I think you're next, right?
Yes. All right. That's me. So my name is Mario. And when I was invited by Jessica to be here, I asked myself, well, what can I say? How can I contribute? And I said, I'll speak to the men in the audience. Look around you. Yeah, that's what so now I'm really nervous. What am I going to say? So I'll try to justify me being here. I'm the son of a single mother who was an academic in Ecuador in the 80s. So culture was different, and Ecuador is different. That's South America, very Catholic, somewhat conservative. And she raised me by herself, and she got her academic career by herself. And then she became the dean of the school where she was working at the university where she was working at. And I'm also the husband of a professor here in Sweden. She's also from Ecuador, and you can talk to me about why we're here in Sweden later. And she goes through the struggles of what a female professor goes through. So these are two very close people to me that I've had the experience, I've shared their experiences and their frustrations. So perhaps we'll get to talk a little bit about my perspective from that. But I did want to focus the perspective on how to help men be aware of what they can do to help, because that's a big question. So if you want to know more about that, ask me about homosocial networks later. The first thing I wanted to talk about is Braille Touch. This is a story of a 35-year-old college dropout. His name is Brian, and he participated in a subject study, he and his family, and he discovered that he loved HCI. He'd never done it, but he thought this is something that he would love doing and be good at. So he started approaching people at Georgia Tech to see if he can donate his time and whatever skill he had to the research. And that's where we started working together. I'll make the long story very short. He discovered that texting for blind people was very, very difficult and slow, especially on mobile devices with touchscreens where they are truly blind because they can't feel what they are touching. So he saw that the numbers were 1 and 2 words per minute for something like VoiceOver, the Apple entry method. And he designed this thing here where he folded the traditional Braille typewriter keyboard, which is straight like this. He folded it so that people can hold their phone, and then he faced the screen away from the user, who, by the way, doesn't need to see the screen. And we created Braille Touch. And then we were covered by CNN and BBC. I was interviewed, and we got thousands of emails asking us to please put it in the App Store. And it took about a year to go from this idea to actually deploying the system in the App Store. And one of the decisions we made was not to patent. We didn't have the money, and we didn't want to recover a patent from the people that we were trying to serve. And we were hoping that somebody would copy us, someone big. So I'm really, really happy to say that something that looks just like that, perhaps inspired by this, is now part of iOS 8 and 9, I guess. I haven't tried 9. But Apple basically took our keyboard and they implemented it into the iOS. So we were very happy about that. Of course, we didn't make any money. All right. So that's one I wanted to talk about. This project is ongoing right now. This is a master's student who started with the idea of how to create 3D sketches using a tablet and some of the sensing and gesture-based recognition capabilities of the tablet, so that the same way that you basically externalize ideas through sketching on paper, here you can externalize ideas by sketching on the tablet, and these are 3D ideas. Again, I'm showing you some of the strange options that some of my colleagues and I have taken in order to try to have a job. But the two last options, they haven't made any money, so that's not good for you. This next option actually has made money, and it may continue to make money. It is a visualization of the history of the metro system of Stockholm. The title there, Tidebanan, is sort of like time tunnel. And the students have sold it very quickly, within 2 weeks, to the Transport Museum in Stockholm. And you can go and you can visit. Now it's a permanent exhibit there. And they have actually made money, not a lot, but they're their own bosses. And they incorporated a company in those 2 weeks of negotiation. One of the things they had to do was be able to invoice the museum. So one of their tasks was to incorporate a company, and they did. I am so amazed. So that's what I wanted to say in terms of sort of strange jobs. And I end with this slide here, which is my students in the information visualization course. And you can see that I don't have quite equal representation, but I'm trying to get there. So if you have any ideas on how to improve this, I'd be really, really happy to hear. Thank you.
Okay, so I really want to open the floor for questions. So I think we have a microphone around. Perfect. If anybody is streaming in, you can also ask questions on Twitter. I've got my phone. I will check. And if you're being shy, I do have questions, but I'd like to let you ask questions.
I have a question for Monika. How would you compare your experience in a small startup to working with Google, which is a huge, huge industry, and just being bought by Google? What did it change in your job, in your flexibility, or things like that, on your work experience?
Are these on? Ah, okay. Everything changed. A lot has changed. The main difference is the scale, I would say. The startup was very dynamic. Things were happening very, very fast. It was very friendly. It was very, we're very close. It was a very small team. We didn't have resources, however. We're working on things that did not reach millions of users like we do at Google. When we're acquired, the biggest thing that changed is that scale. We suddenly got huge resources. We could do the things that we couldn't do before. Things got a little bit slower and more considerate. You just have to be a little bit more considerate when you're working on something of that scale. I think that is the biggest difference. And there are great sides to each experience, and I value both of them equally, I would say, but they're very, very different things. I would encourage that people have both if they can in their careers. I love the drive you had to show in the startup. I really loved how fast and dynamic things were, but I really, really appreciate the scale and the resources that I have to do things now and the impact that you can make.
Hi, I'm Anna from Aalto University. Maybe a question to the only man, now that we have him here. So we've been talking, I think, also about work-life balance for women especially, and anywhere industry or academia. I guess in academia it may be a bit easier, but how do you see it from the man side? How do you handle if your student or postdoc gets pregnant or whatever? Are you annoyed by it, and do you want to admit it, or how you handle these situations? Are you flexible enough to do it, or how do you see it also in industry? Any comments on it?
So the question is, how do I handle working with women in general, or more specific than that? I'm really, really not a good representative to ask this thing, because I share a good part of the responsibility of raising our children and being home if they're sick and stuff like that. Carla is sitting just behind you, and she is my master's student, and she likes dancing and club life, and I don't remember the last time I went to a club, and she wanted to do a master thesis on visualizing dance behavior in a group and using phone-based sensing and visualization on a large screen, and get people to appropriate this technology to make the dancing experience more enjoyable. And that's completely alien to me. And yet I supported her, and I admired her in her methods, and gave her the experience that I had that could help her, and guided her towards the experience that she needed that I couldn't help her with, which is, I guess, one of the things that we have to do. We have to recognize what we have and what we don't have. And one of the things that I don't have is a female perspective, per se. So I can appreciate the struggles, but I can never understand them fully. And I accept that. So that's the short answer.
That is, like, very often we have the impression that it's going to be harder with men for this type of problems, but don't think that sexism only comes from men. Like, you do have some women that are very difficult to work with. I have a friend of mine who has a female professor who never had kids, who thought about her career, so she doesn't understand that her students want to have a different style of life. And she doesn't get it because that's not the direction she took. And yeah, so sexism can come from both sides. And I think Mario being here is not going to be representative of the people who are not going to be supportive of women's career, I guess.
I got to say this. I'm really disappointed that there are no male participants in the audience. There's one now? Where are you? Oh, I see you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not disappointed anymore. You brought my hopes up a lot.
Hello. Well, I want to follow up on this thing that there are no men in the audience. We were just talking with some girls about this, and we realized that this is a conference for celebrating women in computing, and I think that a big part of celebrating it and making an impact should be showing that to men. So, well, question to Mario, like, how do you manage every day to try to, you were mentioning something about trying to correct or educate men about the situations that sometimes women have that are not so nice. And also I would like to hear the rest of the opinions from the panelists, like how can we make this happen if conferences like this don't attract men?
Thank you for the question. So I asked, if you want to know more about this eye-opening experience for me, ask me about homosocial networks. Now, some of you may have heard of it, some of you may not accept it. It is a social theory for the most part. But here's my eye-opener from about 1.5 years ago. Humans, we tend to like people of the same gender. And when we have non-romantic relationships with those people, we form what is called homosocial networks. And these homosocial networks are very strong. We sort of talk the same way, we like the same things, we go to the same places, and we don't have this issue of whether or not we can become romantically involved. We don't care. So we can relax and we can have conversations about everything. The problem is when you bring that very basic, natural human nature into the workplace, and then you take conversations and activities that are meant for the workplace, for example, decision-making and steering decisions, into the homosocial network activities, like going to the spa or playing golf. And you make a decision in that environment, naturally excluding female participation. That is a problem. And the greatest problem is that you may not be aware of it. So this is what I had prepared for the men in the audience. Be aware of activities that are primarily liked by men, and either steer away from them or give an opportunity to share time outside of the office in activities that other people like. Just be nice in that way. Take turns. But the problem is we're not aware of it. We really, really are not aware of it. We have to become aware of it to see it. And it goes both ways. It's just that the problem is in workplaces where most of the people are male, to break in is very, very difficult.
Just want to follow up on this. I agree totally with what you're saying, and of course this is a homosocial network here because it's only women in computer science. But I think it's not always bad because we don't have that so much, the women in computer science. So sometimes, like once a year, to be as a group of women and to be able to talk to each other freely is also a good thing sometimes.
Perhaps I should leave for a bit. The thing is, you're taking your turn.
Yeah.
That's the thing, yes, of course.
And I want to say something. You assume that the romance happens only between opposite sex. That is not necessarily true. And then also that you already are experiencing something we experience every day. You're the only one. And we are a lot of times the only one. So now I think there's some empathy in here. Anyway. Any more questions?
That's again another question for the almost only men in the room, but maybe also from the lady from Inria. So you have a data visualization group where you have almost equality of gender. And is it easier in your field to have more women? And a bit for user interface domain, is it easier?
My primary field is human-computer interaction, HCI. Last night at 9 p.m. Stockholm time, we were delivering our papers, hoping for the best for the main conference, ACM-W. And our community is not a very good representative of what happens in computing, just as I am not a very good representative of men here. We have not only very, very strong and powerful female representation in terms of publications and impact, but also the community is routinely led by women. Christina Höck, Elizabeth Meinet have chaired ACM-CCI, sorry. I also work with graphics, and then the numbers go down dramatically. And I work with high-performance computing, and then the numbers go to 0 most of the time. And it's really, really frustrating. And you know how they say you have to pick your battles? This is one battle that every now and then I try to enter it, but I get out of it so bruised by my male sort of colleagues that I step out of it, and then I refocus on submitting that Chi paper or something like that. So being here for me today is very important because I'm in the battle, but I can't sustain this battle for very long periods of time. I need to get out of the water every now and then, or more often than not.
So I'm also in the same field, actually, human-computer interaction. So we also worked on our papers yesterday. The Chi conference is really special in computer science because you have 1/3 of participants who are women, which is a lot. And since the past years, they have always organized the women's breakfast, which is also a homosocial event, because it's only women and a few male people supporting the women who gather to have breakfast together, and then there's some women or men speaking up as role models, explaining their career experience, etc. And so what actually the Chi community is experiencing, that there's no longer so much a problem about women and men, but more about other groups being excluded. Like, for instance, people from Africa or some countries in Asia don't really travel to Chi because it's really expensive to go there, or they don't have it's really hard to get a paper in, and if they don't have as much support as, for instance, American universities or European universities, it's really hard. So next year, it's not going to be a women's breakfast, it's going to be a diversity lunch. So we're opening up to the LGBT community, to different cultures, to focus on accessibility also. There's a few researchers who have disabilities. So I'm part of this organizing committee, and if any one of you is in the HCI community, I encourage you to come, because it's really about having the diversity, not only men and women, not only focusing on this, but being more larger and including everyone into the conference.
In speech synthesis, I guess it is a male-dominated field, but we have a strong female representation. When you go to conferences, there was just one 2 weeks ago, the major one in the field, Interspeech in Dresden, and there's more and more PhD students working on the field, choosing that as their specialization. So I think we're doing great. And in my team at Google as well, at the point of acquisition, I was one of the 2 women. Now we have, is there perhaps 6 more other than me? Some of us already left to other teams. Now they work on different problems, but we're growing stronger, and we also have great diversity initiatives at Google. We're going all to Grace Hopper conference, Celebration of Women in Computing, which is happening just next month in Houston. So we're going to be there. We're sponsoring. We're sending researchers to present papers. So yeah, I think things are changing, and they're looking up.
So you're all in very interesting fields. How did you end up in those fields? Like, do you have any advice for people here who may not know what they're doing next? Or, how did you end up in the field where you're at?
I have to say, for me, it was part coincidence and part interest. I also work on computational semantics, and this is actually what my PhD research was on. Which is on hold right now. I'm not a student right now, just dropped out. But it was a combination of, I met a lot of great people at university, And if you connect with someone and you feel that they can really guide you, they're a great supervisor. This is a person I met on my path. I ended up writing a thesis under his supervision. And I thought, well, this is great. This is going to be a great project. And it continued. And my first job was in speech synthesis, and it stayed like that. So I always had a strong interest in that. But if I had not met the people that I had met, perhaps I would now be in a slightly different place. So I would just say, keep your eyes open, connect with people, and take advice from them as well. And if somebody you feel is really pushing you in your research is a really great advisor, then I would say, well, stick with them, because that's really quite important.
For me, it has been quite a journey, actually. So I started with a degree in information technology, which was between computer science and electrical engineering. I didn't like the electrical engineering part so much, so I focused on computer science. And while I was working in industry, I noticed that I didn't want to do software development all my life, and that I'm a pluridisciplinary person. I really like different stuff, so I don't really want to focus on one discipline. So when I decided to go back to university, I looked at different fields you can combine with computer science. And I discovered HCI actually during my work at Bosch, because some of the people were working on HCI questions, but I didn't know this existed as a research field. It's quite recent, actually, and universities have been starting teaching HCI only recently. So when I did my first degree, it didn't exist in Germany, I think. So I never heard the term human-computer interaction as a research field before. And only because I really knew that my position, the position I was in, was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, I actively started searching for what is more interesting for me. Yeah, and I found this master doing this, and when I read the description of the master, it's like, okay, this sounds really interesting, so that's how I ended up in HCI.
All right. So you're giving me a great opportunity here. So I'm going to answer the most honest and naked way that I can. I applied for a Fulbright scholarship and got it, and then I had to make a decision. What do I want to study, and sort of something like that. And at the time, I was 26. I decided that I wanted to do the hardest thing I could imagine. I wanted to devote, this Fulbright scholarship, and it was just for a master's, but I wanted to do the hardest thing I could imagine. And I discovered, for me, that was artificial intelligence. And I did a master's in artificial intelligence, neural networks and stuff like that. And then I started my PhD in computer vision. Keeping up with my colleagues, with the other PhD students in computer vision was really, really, really tough for me in terms of programming and mathematics. They just were incredibly good, and I failed. I failed miserably. I didn't have impact in computer vision. I published, but sort of like not great things. I didn't pass my qualifiers. So then I had to choose: do I leave the PhD program, or do I re-examine my goals? So instead of doing the hardest thing that I could imagine for me, I decided that I was going to go for the best thing that I am when I compare myself with my peers, so that I can get ahead in the race and publish, basically. And now is, of course, get grant money. And one of the things that I've always been able to do is sort of make drawings and explain things through visual representations. So I started going towards information visualization, and that opened the doors to HCI, which at the time when I was doing computer vision, I looked down upon people on HCI, primarily because of Wizard of Oz. I thought that was completely bogus. I understand now the benefits and the value of Wizard of Oz, and if you don't know what it is, look it up, it's fantastic. You basically fake the technology to elicit a response. So the short answer to that is I stopped kidding myself, and I looked for something where I'm really good at, and then worked on that so that I can actually take steps to publish and get money, grants. And I like it better.
Yes, so Mario said before that in human-computer interaction there are more women than in other computer science fields. But in my experience, most of the women in human-computer interaction don't come from the technical fields, since it is so interdisciplinary. So what is your view on that? Because sometimes I get told that or people assume that I don't come from the technical field just because I'm a woman. So it's the same problem again within human-computer interaction.
I just exposed myself because I said that I looked down upon HCI when I was in computer vision. You want to take it? Please.
So my degree was in robotics, and then from robotics I went to computer science doing virtual reality. I worked for a few years in that field, and then went back to do a PhD in HCI, so that was not planned, ever. I really liked the aspect of HCI because I could create physical interaction, because I was an engineer, so I could make something, and actually people could use it, and they could physically use it, and that's what I really liked about it. And when I arrived in the Chi community, there's all these women. But then in the Chi community, we have a sub-community called WIST, which is a more technical part of the conference. And we're about 30, 40, 50 women going every year, which is really not that many. So as a field, there's a ton of women. The technical women in HCI, there's less people, but there's less people in general. But I think within the community, people are very aware that, you know, if you're here and you're good, you know, you must be good at what you're doing, and there's no judgment about it. Now you have people in different fields of computer science who have different feeling about different areas. But, you know, people in AI think it's better than, like, other style of computing. And people in, you know, HCI think, well, we care about users, you don't. So what's the use? And I think everybody likes their field, you know, and they're passionate about it. And I think that's why they don't like other fields as much sometimes. I think it's a bit of inner pride. But I think within communities, if you're doing well, people know you're good at what you're doing and they respect it. So I don't think you should feel bad. People just know, you know, if you're there, you should be there.
I do want to add a little bit to that. So I've met mathematicians, pure mathematicians, who look down upon applied mathematics, really. I actually did a postdoc in applied mathematics here in Uppsala University. I've met, you know, you can name it. You can name it chemistry people that look down upon chemical engineering. It happens everywhere. And it is a very snobby thing to do. And having done it, I feel really awful for having done it. I now look upon anything with a sense of ignorance. I don't know what you do. Tell me more. And I think, you know, it took a beating for me to get that.
Just a quick something I want to add is, yesterday in the keynote by Vicky Hansen, I discovered that she comes from psychology. I didn't know that. I know her because she's really famous in HCI. But for me, she was not associated with being a psychologist. She was just a famous HCI person. I guess once you come to the point of being a professor anyways, you're not doing programming so much anymore, or not at all. So finally, if she comes from psychology or computer science, her job today would be the same and she would have the same impact.
From within, so I just gave you the answer from outside, looking down on a field. But from within the field, when you try to express what you do to people from other fields, so for example, let's talk very specifically, high-performance computing. They're all about the wires and the machines and the parallel coding. And you come to them with issues about scientists making sense of the visualizations that their computers are producing. For them, it's such an alien question. So I think coming from within the field, you have to see things from their perspective. They care about the wires and the machines and the number of parallel processors that they can put into their programs. So I do think you have to learn a little bit about what they care about, for example, parallelism, and how that makes a difference in real-time visualization of complex data, for example. Then they get really interested, and they see opportunities of collaborating with you. But you have to learn a little, coming from within the field.
A question? That's highly related to what you already speak, because in this conference, I have had a feeling that most of people are from HCI or some human-related computing. Okay, I am the person who likes the wires and servers, and my background is distributed system and pervasive computing. So I would like to ask if you have feeling that the girls, undergraduate females, are somehow, in silence, a little bit pushed to the human computing. I have this feeling from my department in Helsinki, but have you seen this? Okay, you are in HGI, and I can understand, but my question basically is why there is no more theoretical female researchers? Because this distribution between the different computer science area, their separation is quite high.
The question is for me, I just want to clarify it, or?
The question is, can you see that there is some encouragement for the female to go more human sense areas in computer science instead of the theoretical parts or the wires, as you mentioned by yourself?
Yes, but the question is for all of us? Or,
yes, all of us.
Okay, good, good. So I'll rest.
I've read actually statistics saying that women are going more for the human-centered technologies and stuff like that because they want to do something that is purposeful or that fulfills the purpose. So women, when they search for a job, often have the intention to contribute to society, to find something that helps improve society or helps other people. So this is one of the reasons why they would go more for bioinformatics or human-computer interaction or things that feel like you really impact current society.
One more thing, because this is maybe true in the statistics, but this is not true with the individuals. And when you, as a teachers and researchers, are speaking with the individual girls in your department, do you think that you somehow still market of course you market your own area, but if you think that issue as kind of like a freshman course lecturer or head of department who is not related to one single area, so can you see that there is this discrimination in between the CS fields? Of course, as a HCI people, you see what's interesting there, but in general, and with the individuals, that's my question somehow. Thanks.
What I would like to add to this is, I wouldn't want to speculate if there's any research saying that women prefer or are better at this or that men are better at this and that, because I know that there's plenty of theories why we have a distribution the way we have it right now of women in technical fields. But I think what is important is that if you do choose to do it, that there are no unreasonable hurdles that you experience just because you're a woman. And I think this is what we should focus on, that if you do have an interest in a technical field or you do want to pursue that career path, that there is nothing that others don't have to experience that you do, and that makes it harder for you. And when it comes to the issue of why there's so few of us, I really would love to see initiatives that are starting a little bit earlier. I think it's, personally, I think it's a little bit late when we have outreach initiatives directed at university students, because you're already here, you're already studying it. And I would love to see more initiatives directed at girls in primary schools or in high schools. We actually do quite a bit of that at Google, and I speak very often to very, very young girls, just trying to show them that this is a viable interest for them and kind of awaken their interest in technology. And I think this is where it should start, and it would be great to show those really, really young girls that still have the opportunity to choose what they're interested in or what they want to do, that it's fun, that it's not just for boys, and that we can all do it. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's what I wanted to add.
I couldn't hear very well what you were asking, but I think you're asking a really, really tough question. I'm going to try to paraphrase it from what I understood. Basically, it's a reaction against this stereotypical idea that women are going to like humanistic fields more, or that they're going to be better at them. So somehow the field of computing, the serious computing, the core computing, the systems and networking and performance, sort of accept this reality that they're going into HCI and some form of anthropological computing. Is that sort of where you want to get at? Because I really want to understand, because I think it's a difficult question. Kind of. Right.
Can I just ask, how do you define push?
Yeah.
What are the specific experiences that you think women have that push them towards those fields that perhaps they don't have that much interest in, but they feel that that's where they belong or that's where they should go? So I have some of those experiences, but they're very early experiences for me, like comments from primary school teachers that, oh, you know, B- in maths, oh, it's okay for a girl, or horrible handwriting for a girl, seriously. But, you know, that was many, many years ago, and I hope that these things don't happen anymore. But later on, what kind of pushing are we talking about?
I basically mean the pushing kind of, for example, when you're discussing with your career with your tutors and lecturer tutors. I don't know if your university has these kind of discussions. And I think, for example, discussing about the thesis topics in master's or bachelor thesis and this kind of way. I have a feeling just from my department, but because I can see there is a lot of people interested in HCI. So, and I'm a little bit alone in this conference with my wired and servers. So, so my feeling is mainly, I think it's mainly from my department and the discussions I have had with the tutors and lecturers about which are the areas they are giving you if you have no idea what to do in your thesis or in industry. Because I think the university studies nowadays are very early they start thinking about the career, and very early you have to somehow know what you want to do after the university. There is no lifelong university studies anymore. So the two areas I have heard my girlfriends in my university have told to take are HCI and databases for some reason. I don't know if this is the situation anywhere, but because the reality is that in HCI community you have more women. So that was actually my question. Do you see this kind of pushing to HCI community, or?
I think I have a handle on the question. I'm going to give you my current perspective. I've been involved in recruiting full professors at KTH into the high performance computing and visualization department. And the people that sat around and thought about who we would like in that position, everybody in that meeting, and it's not a representative sample, it is the people that had this opportunity, everybody wanted to do our best to recruit a female professor. We actually made a list of all the female professors that were qualified to, or associate professors that were qualified to fill the full professor position. And they were all happily employed at their own places. And it was a struggle. It was a difficult struggle. And in the end, and I'm sorry to say that we did not hire a female professor. He is a man. Sometimes it feels like you want to pull, but they're either very happily employed and live where they want to live, they don't want to move, or, and there's very few of them. But I'm talking at the highest level, full professor. At lower levels, I really believe it's just a matter of letting people explore and decide what they want to do and then giving them full support. Not pushing them into, why don't you do a thesis on that or a thesis on that? If you're funded by some money that has to push them, yeah, that's different. You hire somebody to do the job. But if you have the flexibility of decision, let the student decide. So that's my experience.
If I could just very quickly add that you also have a responsibility towards yourself to always ask yourself a question when you're taking a decision regarding your career or anything else. Are you doing it because you feel pushed, or are you doing it because it's a genuine interest and genuinely what you want to do? And I think we all ask ourselves those difficult questions whenever we decide something about our lives, and just being aware that not all of your decision-making comes solely from what you want to do, but sometimes maybe there are those, you know, pushing, pulling forces. Just ask yourself, and if you feel that it's not really what you want to do, but you're being pushed, then that is your chance to do something about it. And then the second part of it is the responsibility on the part of everybody else that might be in the position to do the pushing or pulling, just not to do it. And all the professors, supervisors, recruiters, managers, this is really a huge responsibility. If you are in that position, you really have a huge responsibility not to do it or to exercise the force in the right direction. So just like a small point to add. You wanted to add more?
I have a different perspective on this. So I've experienced, since I arrived at Inria last year, that we always get more applications for internships and PhDs than people we can take. And I think it's kind of related to the HCI thing. I don't think it's for all the teams, because what we're doing is so easy to show to people, actually. So you can have very visual prototypes, and I mean, what Mario showed you in his slides, there's many technical questions or other questions related to the things he was showing about interacting with 3D on a tablet. You have really technical questions about 3D, you have technical questions about how to interact with the tablet, the multi-touch, etc. But you don't need to know all this to understand what he's doing. If you want to talk about other domains, you really have to go into detail and say, and this is the mathematical model, and if you change this, then this is going to happen. And this is the advantage maybe of HCI or visual computing or things like that, that you don't have to explain the details and people see and they say, oh, wow, this is cool. So yeah, maybe this is the thing. Without really want to pushing people, they actually, you know, they somehow get attracted to that more easily. I don't know.
Question at the front.
So, Mario, you talked very briefly about taking on a research assistant who didn't have a degree. And I think that one of the ways that we can diversify the field is to be more accepting of people with less traditional education backgrounds. And so I was wondering if you or any of the other panelists have thoughts on how we can do that in a more systematic way.
Wow. Like I said, Brian was a 35-year-old college dropout. He was struggling to keep his job and maintaining a family of 4, including himself. And he just got terribly interested in research. And he is now a PhD student. At the time I was a postdoc, I'm now an associate professor, and so on and so forth. So, and none of that work was funded. Everybody who, we had Caleb Southern, another PhD student, Gregory About, a distinguished professor from KTH. We were all basically donating time to this thing. And now it's a permanent feature of the iOS. It's fantastic. How do we duplicate that? I don't know. Brian was really, really motivated, and at the same time, very, very difficult to work with him. Very irregular performance. And to be completely honest, to try to tackle that battle at the cost of letting the paper go or letting a grant go, an opportunity, is a very high stakes game to play. But perhaps there's an opportunity to figure out a granting method. Brian used to call it capture diamonds in the rough. He considered himself a diamond in the rough. There are educational efforts to fund this type of activity, but there are not many of them. So I think the answer to your question is a little bit of legislature. Try to pass laws within the grant funding agencies to instantiate opportunities, second opportunities, and third opportunities for people that lost their first opportunity at education, for example, but still have something to contribute. So it's a very, very high stakes game, and the type of game that I don't have the resources to play. Perhaps when I'm full professor, all granted, and my PhDs start taking care of themselves, I can start looking into joining that battle. But it's a really, really scary battle.
I have an experience from industry that is somewhat related to that. A few years back, I was involved in a program that was, from my part, was mentoring. I was already at Google, and I was working with a person without a formal background to do certain jobs. But at the end of this a few month-long program, they were competing for apprenticeships with major companies like Barclays. So people that had the talent or the drive and the motivation but didn't have the formal background to apply through the graduate programs for those jobs had the opportunity to work for a few months, develop more skills and present them to potential employers, and then complete apprenticeships that could lead to permanent employment. So I think it's, I'm sure, a lot easier in the industry to do something like that, to kind of open the doors to people with less traditional backgrounds. But that's one way of doing that, some kind of apprenticeship programs.
Time for one more question. Over there. This is actually two. But
hi, I have a question to the two men in the room, but also to the women who made it to a field that is largely dominated by men. I mean, for example, this high-performance computing was mentioned before. Do you have some practical advice how we can crack these young old boys networks? I mean, like something we should keep in mind, something how we can, get into these homogeneous circles.
It's a tough one because the only advice that I have and what I've been doing, I think very successfully, is perhaps the unfair way, as in just showing a bit more strength. I can't think of anything else. But I think what helped me, I built some great networks, and I have amazing male colleagues, and I feel supported by them. And I didn't have any major struggles, but I just did connect with them from the very beginning. Maybe because I was the only girl and I just had no choice. Like, I was going to work every day. I had to speak to them, and I had to, go out with them and have conversations with them and do social stuff with them. We're largely new in the city as well. We had no other friends. I would like to see a world where we don't have to do any extra work to break into those clubs because they exist, but I think for now we kind of have to, and if we don't, then they're just going to be there. So I would say maybe you organize something, or maybe you connect with other females and do something as a group of females that those guys would want to join too, and try to grow your power, your powerful network, your project, your impact, so that others want to join you. And it's less about that boys club that you try to break into, but more about presenting value yourself and with your female colleagues that is really taken seriously. I know it's unfair. I do know it's unfair, but I think that's the only thing I can think of right now.
I think the idea of connecting to other women is also helpful. If you feel lost, you can have like a mentoring thing. If you find a more senior woman who is in the same field and who knows the struggles, and you can exchange with her about career decisions, etc., this can be really helpful. So it's a bit of life's chance to meet the right person you really connect with. But you can also search for that. I know there's mentoring programs. Jessica was doing some of them, I think, from the ACM, right? There's a, sorry?
The Girl Geek Dinners, you mean?
I think you tried out the ACM mentoring program.
So there's different mentoring programs that exist. There's some, I know some in the UK, but there's different in different places, and those are really great because you meet someone who may be in your exact field or like similar field, but will really help you, understand what's good for you and how you build your network. And I think having someone supportive at work really makes a difference. During my PhD, I wasn't very supported by my PhD advisor, and I found it very difficult. During my postdoc now, I have a boss who's very supportive, and it's just so much easier. And it's one big difference I see. So I was in Europe until I've been in the US for a year and a half, but all the time I was in Europe, it was hard all the time. And when I moved to the US, I think right now, just at this point in time, there's more awareness over there that it's harder for women and that they want to make a change. So right now, they understood that and they're helping and they're pushing you a bit more. And I see my student at Stanford, they're being pushed from like first year university. They're being told, okay, you have to do a research project, you have to be on a paper, or you've worked on that, ask to be on that paper, do this, do that. And they basically build something from scratch because they're given all this guidance. In Europe, unfortunately, right now, we don't have it yet. we're working on it, and we're hoping to get there, but we're not there right now. So right now you have to find out for yourself, how do I make this way? How do I make it happen? And finding those women, finding those men, those sponsors who are going to help you understand, what do I do if I want to have options? I need to do maybe a 2-month research internship, or maybe I can go 2 months somewhere and like try something else. And just finding those people, I think, is really, really key to that.
And one other point I wanted to make is I frequently meet women at events also like that. And practical piece of advice, I think mentorship and cultivating those relationships is extremely important, and it can really help you in your career. But I often find that girls don't follow up. So we make a connection at an event perhaps, or maybe we're discussing an internship, maybe we're discussing something or possible collaboration. And I think it's important that we all follow up. I get a lot more communication and follow-ups from men than from women. So don't be shy. I put my email address there for a reason. So do follow up, there's LinkedIn. We meet, once a year or a few times a year, but let's just make sure that something comes out of these conversations. There's a question at the back, yeah? Yes.
I think there's one more question, or maybe two, because you had your hand.
Not so long this time. That's mainly a comment that my lab is male only, except myself. And I have to say, for that last question, that I have got the best encouragement from my male colleagues, and I cannot say that they are so different from us. So just raise your own issues and questions and behave like a normal people, and I think most of the men understand you as well as they understand their main colleagues. Of course, situation can be different if they fell in love to you or something like that, but if they can act like a professionals and you can act like a professional, so I haven't met any problems in my lab because I'm a female.
Here, and then we need to wrap up.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit. I want to share something about the question about how to open more opportunities to people that don't have an extensive education yet, and then turn it into a question. So I did my systems engineering career in Argentina, and since the second year of the studies, I was a teaching assistant. 4 or maybe 5 years before graduating. By the time I graduated, I already had 5 years of teaching experience. I decided to come to Europe and continue with a master's. So after the first semester that I finally got paid for teaching a course, I had to quit. But I have friends that started with at the same time as I did, some colleagues, and now they are assistant professors in the course that we were where we were teaching assistants. So I think that there are other Latin Americans around. I don't know if in their universities they had similar practices, but here in Europe, I noticed that it's like a bad word to talk about students teaching, I mean bachelor students or even master students teaching courses in the university. And for me, it was a life-changing experience. Actually, in the systems information engineering career that I did, the technical courses were mostly concentrated between the first and the third year. The last years were more management things. And maybe if I hadn't had the chance to explore more the technical side of the career when it was the right time, I wouldn't be here today. So the question now is, do you see value in this, and why do you think that the European education system is so different and doesn't allow these kind of things?
Who's the question for? Everybody?
Sorry, mostly the academic people.
Okay. Anke,
I think
go.
You guys should take it. More experience in academia.
You want to go, Anke?
I don't really know what to say. I think our system thinks that people who don't have done at least a master are not worth teaching. Even during my PhD, I wanted to teach a course in a master, and they told me they only take teachers of quality. So me being a PhD student wasn't good enough. I have been able to teach since I was a PhD student, but I've never heard of, in France, of someone teaching at the level of the master. I don't know, the system is just not providing the possibility so much.
I think it's just an older society, you know, it's a way it worked. Like, normally teaching was such a privilege, you know, it was like people of like old men of knowledge, you know. And I think it's taking longer in older cultures for things to change. And again, in the US, like from second year, bachelor student can be TA. We have tons of TAs, like the courses are so big, but it's normal. And in Europe, yeah, even during your PhD, like, and they don't advise you to teach. They really like, don't teach. It's like, takes too much time. It's not worth it, and you're not gonna be good enough. But I really think it's like this older culture. I think it's more that than anything else. I don't know what.
Sweden in particular, and I don't know how representative it is of Europe, is very formal in awarding degrees and what these degrees give you license for. So you actually need, after the PhD, the docent degree to be the main supervisor of a PhD student. So in that sense, it's just more formal, which also means it's more bureaucratic, which also means I think it's a cultural mechanism for quality control. I think the US may be more informal in other ways, and perhaps Argentina and other places. So these are cultural issues, and I can talk for a few of these different cultures, but it is what it is, and you have to adapt.
Okay, we're a bit late and we need to leave the room. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you to our speakers. Okay, I think we